Hello everyone and welcome back to today's lesson on React. Finally, today we're gonna dive into what React is and why it's become such a pivotal tool in modern web development. So let's begin with the fundamental question. What is React exactly? React is an open source JavaScript library specifically designed for building user interfaces, or simply UIs. It was developed and is currently maintained by Facebook or Meta, and it's used extensively not just by Facebook, but by many other companies and startups, as well as developers around the world. So React focuses on the view layer of web applications, which means it's all about what you see on the screen and how users interact with it. It enables the creation of interactive and dynamic web applications, allowing us to build rich and engaging experiences for the users. In essence, React helps us build applications that can respond efficiently to changes in data and provide a seamless user experience. So some of the React core features. Declarative UI is first. So React allows us to design our user interfaces in a declarative manner. So this means we can describe what we want the UI to look like for a given state, and React takes care of updating the actual UI to match the state. This approach simplifies the process of building interactive UIs because we don't need to manually manipulate the DOM or worry about how to transition from one state to another. The other feature is component-based. So in React, our applications are built using components. Components are encapsulated, self-contained units of code that manage their own state and logic. By building with components, we can create reusable pieces of UI that can be assembled to form complex interfaces. This modularity promotes code reusability and therefore easier maintenance. Virtual DOM or DOM. React utilizes a concept known as the virtual DOM. Instead of directly manipulating the browser's DOM, React creates a virtual representation of the UI in memory. When the state of a component changes, React updates the virtual DOM and then efficiently determines the minimal set of changes needed to update the real DOM. This process drastically enhances performance, especially in applications with frequent updates. And another one is learn once and write anywhere. While React is primarily used for web development, the principles and components can be applied to mobile and desktop applications as well, because I'm myself an iOS and Android developer, and I'm currently using React to develop my iOS applications, and so far I've released more than 4 apps to App Store, so React is pretty useful for that. So you don't have to use Swift or Kotlin for like solely developing mobile applications. So this flexibility means that once you learn React, you can leverage your skills across multiple platforms. Okay, so why use React? Now that we've covered the core features, let's discuss why you might choose React over other frameworks in your projects. So first of all, improved performance. Thanks to the virtual DOM, React minimizes direct manipulation of the actual DOM, which can be slow and resource intensive. By calculating the most efficient way to update the UI, React ensures that your application runs smoothly, even with frequent or complex updates. Another one is reusability. React components-based architecture allows us to create reusable components. This means we can write a component once and use it throughout our application wherever that functionality or UI element is needed. So for instance, we can write one component for our hero section in our landing stage for our startup, and we can use it across our applications as many times as we want. This reusability not only saves development time, but also helps maintain consistency across the application. So React also integrates well with other libraries and frameworks. Whether you're building a small feature or a large application, you can incorporate React incrementally or use it in conjunction with other tools. This flexibility makes React suitable for a wide range of projects. And also, React has a very strong community. There are countless resources, tutorials, and libraries available to help you solve problems and extend the functionality of your applications. This community support means you're never alone and when developing with React, and you can often find solutions to challenges you encounter on Stack Overflow, on other websites with strong community. So now let's dive deep. What are components? So at the heart of the React are components. So let's dive deeper in what they are essentially. They're building blocks. Components are the fundamental building blocks of React applications. You can think of them as custom reusable HTML elements that can have their own structure, styling, and behavior. They're self-contained and reusable. Each component is self-contained, meaning it encapsulates all the code necessary for its functionality. This encapsulation allows components to be reused throughout the application without worrying about interfering with other parts of the code. There are also nesting components. Components can be nested within other components to build complex interfaces. For example, you might have a header component that includes a navigation component, which in turn includes navigation items components. Also, it ensures state and props management. So components can manage their own state and accept inputs called props, short for properties. The state is internal to the component and can change over time, while props, properties, are external inputs that are passed down from parent components. Now let's talk about functional versus class components. React provides two primary ways to define components. First one is functional components, and the second one is class components. So let's take an example on functional components. These are JavaScript functions that can accept properties and return JSX, or JavaScript syntax, which is syntax extension that looks similar to HTML. So as you can see in the first example on the top, with the functional component example. So functional components were originally considered stateless, because they didn't manage their own state. However, with the introduction of hooks in React 16.8, functional components can now use state and other React features without writing a class. And the other example is class components. Class components are ES6 classes that extend React component. So that means they were added recently, relatively recently. They have a render method that returns JavaScript syntax, and class components can maintain their own state and have access to lifecycle methods, which are special methods that run at different stages of components' existence. So which one should we use and prioritize over another? While both types of components are valid, the trend in modern React development is to use functional components with hooks due to their simplicity and the ability to use state and lifecycle features without the complexity of classes. Now let's move on to properties and state and components. Understanding props and state is crucial for working effectively with React components. So properties, they're inputs to components. Props are the inputs that are passed to a component, similar to how arguments are passed to a function. They're also passed from parent to a child. Properties are used to pass data from parent components to a child components, and they're also immutable within the component, which means props are read only within the component they are passed to. This means that the component should not modify its own properties. Now let's talk about state. State is data that is managed within the component. It is used to keep track of information that may change over time, such as user input or responses from a server. Unlike props, state is mutable. When the state of a component changes, React re-renders the component to reflect the new state. And updating the state causes the component and its child components to re-render, ensuring that the UI stays in sync with the underlying data. So on the right, here is an example of using state. And let's break down this code. So the properties are the greeting component receives a prop called name from its parent app component. Properties are immutable, meaning the greeting component cannot change the value of name. And now state, the app component manages the state name using the useState hook. And when the input field changes, it updates the state, which triggers a re-render, causing the greeting component to receive the updated name prop. I hope you got the structure of props and states and components, and now we can move on to component hierarchy. So React applications are built by nesting components within components, forming a component hierarchy. So nesting components, you can compose complex UIs by nesting simpler components. For example, an app component might render a header, main content, and footer component. Parent-child relationship. So parent components also can pass data and functions down to child components via properties. This allows for directional data flow, meaning data moves in one direction from parent to child. This approach makes the data flow and logic of your application easier to understand and debug. Since child components cannot directly modify their parents, you reduce the risk of unintended side effects. And they're also, by breaking down your UI into smaller and more reusable components, your code becomes more modular. This modularity makes it easier to maintain, test, and scale your application. So essentially, you can imagine your application as a tree, with the root component as the top and branches representing your child components. Each component is responsible for a specific part of the UI and communicates with the direct children via properties. So, moving on to understanding the virtual DOM. Now let's talk about the virtual DOM, one of the React's key performance features. So let's start off with visual representation. The virtual DOM is an in-memory representation of the real DOM. It's a lightweight copy that React uses to determine what changes need to be made to the actual DOM. So when a component state changes, React updates the virtual DOM first. It then compares the new virtual DOM with the previous one, and it identifies what has changed. React uses diffing algorithm to figure out the minimal number of changes required to update the real DOM. This process is called reconciliation. And updating the real DOM is much slower than updating the virtual DOM, so that's why it's very efficient to use virtual DOM first and connect it to a normal DOM later. So think of the virtual DOM as the set of blueprints. Instead of tearing down and rebuilding a house for every small change, you update the blueprints and then make only the necessary adjustments to the actual structure. So why React is so popular? Given everything we've just discussed, you might be wondering why React has become so popular among developers and companies alike. So first of all, its simplicity and efficiency. React simplifies the process of building complex user interfaces by breaking them down into manageable components and handling the heavy lifting of DOM manipulation. Also, performance, flexibility with integration, and also it has very strong community and ecosystem with a lot of resources available online. And also it's backed by industry leaders. Companies like Facebook, Instagram, Netflix, and many other use React in production, which speaks to its reliability and effectiveness. In summary, React's combination of efficiency, flexibility, and community support has solidified its place within the developer community and sets it apart as the leading tool for modern web development. And talking about the React ecosystem. So React doesn't exist in isolation, right? It's part of the broader ecosystem of tools and libraries that enhances its capabilities. We're going to talk about them later in the course, especially we're going to talk about Next.js. So the first one is React Router, a library for handling routing in single-page applications, which allows you to define multiple routes in your app and navigate between them without reloading the state. The next one is Redux, a state management library that helps manage application state in a predictable way. It is useful for larger applications where state management becomes complex. The next one is probably the most important one that we're going to talk about in this course is Next.js, which is a React framework that enables server-side rendering and static site generation. It drastically improves performance and CEO by rendering pages on the server before sending them to the client. And the last one is Create React App, an officially supported tool to set up a modern React application with zero configuration. We're going to talk about it in the next lesson and how to actually set up our first React application. These tools and others in the React ecosystem provide powerful features that can enhance your development workflow and the capabilities of your applications. So as the summary, to wrap things up, let's summarize what we've just learned today. And so React is a powerful library. By using components, we can create modular, reusable pieces of UI that simplify development and maintenance. React's use of the virtual DOM and the efficient rendering optimizes application performance. And with a vast community and extensive resources, React provides a supportive environment for developers to communicate, collaborate, and write a better code together. So by mastering React, you'll be equipped with the skills to build modern web applications that are efficient, maintainable, and scalable. So thank you all for your attention and participation today. In our next lesson, we'll get hands-on with React by creating our first React application. We'll explore the project structure, learn how to set up the development environment, and start building and rendering components. If you have any questions, once again, or need further clarification on today's topic, please feel free to reach out and ask. I'm excited to continue this journey with you as we'll dive deeper into the world of React and integration of AI in our application as part of our final project. Thank you once again, and happy hacking!